Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 3. This week, we're going to be workshopping your short scenes, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. So let's talk a bit more about the workshopping and revision process. As a playwright, I have been in many, many workshopping situations, and I found them extremely useful. They can also be a little bit intimidating, especially if you haven't been in many workshop situations before. It can be a little bit scary to put our writing out there and to ask people to judge our writing. I can understand that feeling of intimidation. What can help is to know that everybody feels it. Even professional writers who have been doing this for a long time feel a little bit nervous in workshop situations. Hopefully, by the end of this lecture, you'll feel a little bit more confident about it. Let's start by talking about what you're bringing to the workshop, your first draft. And what I want to stress here, your first draft is a draft. It does not have to be perfect. I know a lot of writers, we tend to be a bit perfectionistic. If that's you, know that you're not alone, but know that it's worthwhile to get over that perfectionism. I had to work a long time to get to the point where I let my rough drafts be bad. And now I do. There's a wonderful chapter in Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, called Shitty First Drafts. Almost all writing, almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything, down on paper. My first drafts are often so bad, they're only for my eyes. I don't show them to anybody. I don't even workshop them. I'll then go back, I'll make another draft, kind of first draft 2, that is ready to be workshopped. But that draft might still be very, very incomplete. All right, so that's the point of a first draft. It's you get your ideas down. You see how they do, you see how others react, and then based on feedback, you might decide to change things around quite a bit. So why workshop? A number of good reasons. First, clearly, it's to learn about your writing strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes when I bring a piece to a workshop, I might already have an idea of what its strengths and weaknesses are. But sometimes, based on the feedback I get, things will be brought up that I hadn't even thought of. So come with an open mind and be ready to hear maybe some things that will surprise you about your writing. Learn analytical skills. One of the best ways to learn about writing is to evaluate other people's writing. It can be a very, very good way to practice. You know, if you're listening to somebody's dialogue and something just doesn't sound believable about the dialogue, or you're listening to the flow of a scene and it just drags, it can be really, really useful to you as a writer to try to evaluate that and analyze, why am I having that reaction? Right? What about that scene is creating that reaction? How can I avoid that as a writer in the future? See beyond your own perspective, and this is related to these other ones as well. Often, it's difficult for us to go outside of our own heads. So, for example, sometimes I will know very, very well who a character is and what they want and what's motivating them. And I will think that all of that is very clear on the page because I know it's clear to me. But when I bring it into a workshop, I might get people saying, "Hey, I'm confused. Why did the character do this? Right? Why did she say this? What does she want? Right? What's motivating her?" And that might make me very confused because I thought it was crystal clear. So it really, really helps to get out of your own head, to see your characters from an outside point of view. Good practice handling constructive criticism. You're going to get lots and lots of constructive criticism as a writer, and it's just something that you have to learn to take and not take personally. And that just it requires practice. It's when somebody says something negative about something we've written, often our first instinct is to argue and to say, to get defensive. But if you try to put that initial impulse aside and again have an open mind, let that feedback come in. You can later decide, are you going to use that feedback or not? But it's very, very good practice handling that constructive criticism. Prepare for the future. If you end up going into dramatic writing, screenwriting, or playwriting professionally, and you want to continue with this, you will be doing lots and lots of workshopping. It's just an integral part of being a dramatic writer. So this is very good practice. So those are all the reasons that I'm having us do this. So as I've mentioned, I've been in many kinds of workshop situations. I feel that they kind of run the gamut from very, very unstructured to highly, highly structured. And I've been in all types. In a very, very unstructured workshop situation, you might have, somebody presents their writing, and then it's a free for all, and anybody can say whatever they want, and there is no real moderation. That can be useful, but I don't find that particularly useful. On the other side, you might have a highly, highly structured kind of workshop where respondents respond in a particular order. They respond to certain set questions, and it's otherwise highly, highly structured. And I find some of those formats a little bit stifling. So what I find is that somewhere right in the middle, between unstructured and structured, is the best place in terms of what I have found helpful as for workshops. So at this point, I will go over the guidelines that we're going to follow for our workshops. So here we are, and you can find this in the handouts section of this week's module. You will be assigned 4 other student scenes on B courses. And you'll be able to see these if you go to where you turned in your scene and you click on peer reviews. What you'll need to do is carefully read each scene and annotate it with notes in the margins, along with 1 paragraph of summary comments at the end. There's a couple ways you can do this. One way is you can download the person's scene, and you can annotate it on the PDF. If you prefer to work with a hard copy, you can even print it out, write your comments by hand, and then you'd have to either scan or take a photo and upload it and make sure the person gets the comments that way. But an easy way to do this is directly in B courses, and I will show you how to do that now. So here I am in B courses. Yours is going to look a little bit different because you are in student view, I'm in instructor view, but this I'm just using the example of one of my own short plays here. So when you go in, you will have tools similar to what are up here. So you can go through and let's say something in the script grabs your interest, and you can highlight. Oops, that's too much highlighting. Let's say I want to highlight a line here. I can do that. I can add a comment. Okay. You can also add some text. And so you'd want to go through, comment on, again, what stands out to you, both in kind of a positive way and in maybe a more negative way, places where you were confused or less interested, etc. Then down at the end, when it's finished, you can write your paragraph of summary comments. So for example, overall, this scene was... right? And just a paragraph or so is fine here. So that's how you can do it. You can also, if you want to, use kind of the assignment comments note function over here and type out your comments here and submit them in that way as well. Going back to our guidelines. Here are some things to keep in mind when you are giving those comments. Be both honest and respectful. Those are 2 key components of any workshop. So you want to be honest about how did you feel about this scene. You also want to be respectful. So if you have criticism, make sure that you are phrasing it in a way that is constructive, that is designed to help the person, not to tear them down. You want to be specific, right? So saying I'm confused is not as helpful as something more specific, like the time jump here leaves me unsure about what just happened. As I said, be constructive. Rather than saying, for example, I'm bored, this part is boring. That's a really negative term, boring. You might say something like, I'm less engaged during this part, and then say why. So again, be specific. Find something you enjoyed or admired about each piece, in addition to things that you can recommend revising. Every piece is going to have strengths and weaknesses. So focus on both, not just the things that you'd recommend revising. You can offer suggestions, but avoid using the word should or telling the writer what to do, okay? You don't want to rewrite it for them. So instead of saying, for example, you should cut this flashback or you need to cut this part, you might phrase it differently. Something like, I find this flashback a little bit jarring. You could try instead taking it out and incorporating some of that information into the dialogue in the present moment. So suggestions, but not should. It's okay to point out things like spelling and grammatical problems if they're pervasive, but you don't need to go through and correct everything that you find. That's an editor's job. And then keep your feedback focused on the writing rather than the writer. So focus on what is on the page. So rather than saying, why did you write this? Right? That would be kind of an invasive comment. A writer's reasons for writing something are their own. Okay, so focus not on the writer, but on the words on the page. All right, questions for yourself. So this was for when you are writing those comments. For yourself, bring to workshop a list of 3 to 5 questions about your own scene that you would like feedback on. Okay, make sure that these questions are specific while still being open-ended. So, for example, what do you like about my scene? Not a very useful question. It's so open-ended, you're going to get all kinds of feedback there. Some might be useful, much might not be. Instead, be a little more specific. Something like, do my characters feel well developed? Why or why not? When you are being workshopped, so what we'll do, we'll meet on Zoom. I will be there as well. You will assign roles to, and we'll read out loud your scene. If we need to double cast some roles, that's fine as well. Once we read it all the way through, you will ask those specific 3 to 5 questions, and the other members of your group will give you feedback. Please take notes. I highly recommend taking notes. You may ask clarifying questions, but resist the urge to defend or to explain. I've sometimes been in workshop situations where the writer will respond to all the criticism, all the constructive criticism, and will be on the defensive and respond to every comment. And I find that that's not a very good use of time. As a writer, I always feel like it's most useful to just be quiet and absorb and take notes. And you can always decide later which of these notes are you going to use and which are you going to push aside. All right. Also, take note of when commenters ask questions or are confused, but you are under no obligation to answer those questions. So if somebody says, why did this character do this? Why did he grab the apple at this point? You can write down, take a note that somebody was confused. You don't need to feel obligated to explain why your character took the apple or whatever your character might have done. When you are giving feedback verbally, focus first on those specific questions that the writer asks. If you have additional comments, there will be time for them afterward. And then you want to follow those same guidelines as with your written comments. You want to be honest, respectful, specific, and constructive. And make sure, by the way, that you have those written comments done by the time of your workshop. Okay, so you'll be completing those written comments on each other's scenes. Have that done by the time that we meet for our Zoom conference for workshop. All right, so at this point, you have done that first draft. You get through the workshop, and now it is time to use that feedback to edit and to create your revised draft. What do you do? How do you approach this? It can be a little bit overwhelming. What I would always recommend is first and foremost, take a brief break. When I come out of a workshop, I'm often a little bit overwhelmed. I have a big pile of notes, and it's helpful to just step away from it for a little while rather than diving directly back in. Just get a little distance. Then you can come back with fresh eyes. Reorganize your notes. I tend to take very, very messy notes by hand. Maybe you take more organized notes than me. Maybe you type, maybe you have a system, but I always find it useful to type up my notes and to reorganize them. Sometimes I'll organize them by, what did people like? What did people have suggestions about? Or maybe organize it by, this was about plot, this was feedback I got about character, etc. Look for patterns in the feedback. If one person in a workshop made a certain comment, okay. If 4 or 5 people make the same comment, that tells you, okay, maybe I should really pay attention to this, okay? And I know that our workshops are going to be small, but still look for, are there things that more than one person commented on? Think about what rings true for you. Again, maybe you already suspected that a certain part of your scene was confusing, for example. And if you see that then in the feedback showing up, it will ring true. It will tell you, okay, I think I was on the right track here with what I was thinking about. On the contrary, choose what to ignore. So you do not have to incorporate everybody's feedback, every single piece of feedback. You will get very, very helpful comments, and you will get some not so helpful comments. And that happens in every workshop. So it is up to you to choose what is useful and what is maybe something that you can push aside, right? There are always going to be, you can't please everyone. Maybe you write a fantasy scene and somebody says, hey, fantasy's not really my thing. Why don't you make this more realistic? Right? That's not really a comment that you're going to use. So don't feel that you have to incorporate every single piece of feedback. And then I would make a revision plan. Now for you, since you don't have a lot of time, your revised draft is due this coming Sunday. I would choose a couple of things, like maybe 2 or 3 things that specific things that you can work on. And don't feel like you have to do more than that. So maybe okay, I'm going to work on how this flashback works, and I'm going to work on clarifying my main character's motivation, and maybe one other thing. So choose a manageable, specific number of things that you can work on revising. And then it will be time to write. All right. So I hope now you feel comfortable and confident about going into our workshops. I look forward to hearing your scenes read, and I hope you look forward to the feedback and the experience.